The chamber stretched so high that clouds formed near its ceiling. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the speaking platform, her small human frame dwarfed by the massive alien architecture surrounding her. Above her, thousands of representatives from across the galaxy watched from their floating observation pods. Some had tentacles. Others had scales or feathers or bodies made of living crystal. All of them looked down at her with the same expression, contempt. The human colony of New Harmony will be evacuated, Senior Arbiter Krelnax announced, his voice booming through translation devices. The insectoid creature's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. The Galactic Council has voted. The quantum mineral deposits on that world are too valuable to remain under primitive management. Elena's hands gripped the edges of the platform. She had expected this, but hearing it spoken aloud still made her blood run cold. New Harmony was home to 4.7 million people. Families, children, lives built over 3 generations of hard work and sacrifice. With respect, Senior Arbiter, Elena said, keeping her voice steady, New Harmony is a sovereign human world. We followed all colonization protocols. We registered our claim 200 years ago. You have no legal authority to— We have every authority, Krelnax interrupted, the council chamber filled with clicking, buzzing, and chirping sounds. Alien laughter. Humanity has been part of this council for only 60 standard cycles. You are junior members, children playing at civilization. When the adults make decisions, the children obey. More laughter rippled through the chamber. Elena felt her jaw tighten. 60 years. For 6 decades, humanity had endured this treatment. The condescension. The dismissal of every concern. The regulations designed to keep humans in their place. Earth's government had counseled patience. Play the long game. Prove yourselves worthy. Eventually they'll accept us as equals. But there would be no eventually. Elena understood that now. The council didn't want equals. They wanted subjects. You have 30 standard days to evacuate, Krelnax continued. Any humans remaining after that deadline will be removed by force. This discussion is concluded. Then let me be clear, Elena said. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. The laughter died. New Harmony will not be evacuated. Not in 30 days, not in 30 years, not ever. The silence that followed was absolute. Krelnax leaned forward in his observation pod, his compound eyes glittering. Did this human just refuse a direct order from the Galactic Council? I'm not refusing anything, Elena replied. I'm informing you that your order will not be obeyed. There's a difference on you dare. I dare because you've given us no choice, Elena said. Her voice remained calm, but something cold and hard had entered it. Something that made several nearby representatives shift uncomfortably. For 60 years we've followed your rules. We've accepted your restrictions. We've smiled through your insults. We've been patient because we believed that reason would eventually prevail. She looked up at the thousands of aliens surrounding her. But you've mistaken our patience for weakness. You've confused our restraint with inability. You think because we're young, we're helpless. You think because we're emotional, we're foolish. Elena's hands relaxed on the platform. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper, but every translator in the massive chamber caught it perfectly. You're about to learn the difference. Krelnax's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Is that a threat? It's a warning, Elena said. One I suspect you'll ignore. The senior arbiter gestured dismissively. Security. Remove the human from this chamber. Her government will be fined for this disruption. The vote stands. New Harmony will be evacuated. Dismissed. 2 massive reptilian guards approached Elena. She didn't resist as they escorted her from the speaking platform. As she walked through the exit, she heard the chamber erupt in buzzing conversation. They were already discussing how to divide up New Harmony's resources. They had forgotten her already. Good. On the transit ship back to Earth, Elena sat alone in her quarters. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally catching up with her. She activated her secure communication terminal and waited for the encryption protocols to engage. Director Chen's face appeared on the screen. The head of Earth's Strategic Defense Command looked like he hadn't slept in days. How did they respond? Exactly as predicted, Elena said. They laughed. They dismissed us. They think we'll back down. Chen nodded slowly. Then it's time. Are you sure about this? Elena asked. Once we start, there's no going back. They took that choice away from us, Chen replied. How long do we have? 30 days before their deadline. Based on intelligence, they'll send a peacekeeping fleet within 40 to 45 days to enforce the evacuation. Then we have 6 weeks to prepare. Chen's expression hardened. Activate Aurora Initiative. All phases. Authorization Chen Alpha 70. Elena entered the authorization codes on her terminal. Across human space, encrypted signals began transmitting. Military bases went to high alert. Shipyards accelerated construction schedules. Scientists unsealed classified research projects. Diplomatic staff at council installations began quiet preparations for extraction. For 60 years, humanity had been building, learning, adapting. While the council dismissed them as primitive, human engineers had been reverse engineering every piece of alien technology they could acquire. While council military academies taught by rote from 10,000-year-old manuals, human officers studied every battle, every tactic, every weakness in the galactic power structure. Humanity had hoped it would never come to this. They had genuinely wanted peace. But they had also learned a hard lesson from their own bloody history. Hope for peace, but prepare for war. Director, Elena said quietly, they have thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, technology that's centuries ahead of ours in some areas. I know, Chen replied, but they've also been at peace for so long that they've forgotten what real war looks like. They think conflict is a civilized disagreement settled by committee votes and peacekeeping actions. They follow rules. They fight with restraint. He leaned closer to the camera. We're going to remind the galaxy what happens when you push humans too far. We don't fight civilized wars, Elena. We fight to win. The transmission ended. Elena sat in the darkness of her quarters, watching the stars stream past outside her window. Somewhere out there on New Harmony, families were sleeping peacefully. They didn't know yet that their world had become a line in the sand. They didn't know that humanity's long patience had finally reached its end. In 6 weeks, the Galactic Council would send their fleet to New Harmony. They expected a token resistance followed by quick surrender. They expected humanity to be reasonable. They were going to be disappointed. Elena closed her eyes and whispered the motto that Earth's military had adopted decades ago, spoken in a dozen languages across 100 training facilities. We are not locked in here with you. You are locked in here with us. The galaxy was about to discover why humanity's own history was written in blood, why humans had fought each other so viciously for so long, why every major human advancement had come through conflict and struggle. The Council had crossed the boundary, and humanity was about to explode. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood on the bridge of the UHNS Defiance, watching the enemy fleet approach on her tactical display. 500 Council ships filled the screen, their formations perfect and precise. They moved like they were on parade, not heading into battle. They're hailing us, her communications officer reported. Same message as before. Surrender or be destroyed. Sarah looked at the display showing her own fleet. 50 ships, 1/10 the enemy's strength. Behind them, New Harmony hung in space like a blue and green jewel. 4.7 million people down there watching and waiting. Send them our response, Sarah said calmly. The communications officer nodded and transmitted the pre-recorded message. On every council ship, the same words would be playing now. This is humanity's answer. Come and take it. The council fleet continued its approach. Sarah studied their formation with a tactical eye trained by years of simulation and study. Perfect spacing, optimal firing positions, textbook execution of a superior force intimidation approach. She had seen this exact formation in academy training modules derived from council military manuals. That was their first mistake. All ships, Sarah broadcast to her fleet. Weapons free. Execute pattern Hornet. The human fleet scattered in 50 different directions. The council formation, expecting a defensive cluster, suddenly found their targeting solutions worthless. Human ships weren't where they were supposed to be. They weren't following the rules. The first human missile strikes came from above and below the council formation's plane of reference. More missiles came from the flanks. Not the heavy, powerful weapons the council expected, but thousands of smaller, faster projectiles. Overwhelming point defense systems through sheer numbers. 3 council ships exploded in the first 10 seconds. Admiral Vector, commanding the council fleet from his dreadnought, watched in disbelief as his tactical display lit up with threats from every direction. What are they doing? This isn't proper military doctrine. They're They're everywhere. His tactical officer's tentacles twitched nervously. Sir, they're using guerrilla tactics. Small unit independence. They're not fighting as a unified fleet. That's insane, Vector said. Without unified command, they'll be picked off one by one. But that wasn't what was happening. The human ships moved like a swarm of angry insects, each one independent but somehow working together. They concentrated fire on isolated council vessels, destroyed them, and scattered before reinforcements could arrive. They used the council's own size against them, forcing the massive fleet to maneuver slowly while human ships darted in and out. The battle that should have lasted minutes stretched into an hour. Then 2. Then 3. Sarah's ship shuddered as an energy beam clipped their starboard side. Hull breach on deck 7, her damage control officer reported. Sealing now. Target that cruiser, Sarah ordered. All weapons. The Defiance unleashed everything it had. Missiles, railgun rounds, laser batteries. The Council cruiser's shields absorbed most of it, but human weapons were designed differently than Council technology. Humanity couldn't match Council energy efficiency or shield strength, so they had gone another direction entirely. Kinetic weapons, physical projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. Simple, brutal, effective. The Council cruiser's shields collapsed under the sustained barrage. Human railgun rounds punched through its hull like paper. The ship went dark and began to drift. New contacts, the sensor officer called out. Council reinforcements arriving. Damn, it's their second wave. 200 more ships. Sarah's jaw clenched. They had inflicted heavy casualties, but the math was catching up with them. Her fleet was down to 38 operational ships. Ammunition was running low. Several vessels were barely combat capable. All ships, fall back to defensive positions around New Harmony, Sarah ordered. Then, on a private channel to her senior staff, activate Protocol Samson. Her executive officer went pale. Captain, that's an order, Sarah said quietly. Protocol Samson was humanity's final contingency. Named after an ancient story about a man who brought down a temple on his enemies even as it killed him. Every human warship carried the protocol in its computer systems. Every captain knew what it meant. When ammunition ran out, the ship itself became the weapon. The Council fleet pressed forward, sensing victory. Admiral Vector allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans had fought surprisingly well for primitives, but numbers were telling. This would be over soon. Then something impossible happened. A human destroyer, its weapons silent and hull scarred by battle damage, suddenly accelerated directly toward a Council battlecruiser. The Council ship tried to evade, but the human vessel matched its movements. At the last second, escape pods erupted from the destroyer's hull. The ship, now guided only by its AI, maintained its course. The collision tore both ships apart. What? Admiral Vector started to say, but 3 more human ships were already accelerating toward Council vessels. More escape pods, more AI-guided missiles made of metal and fury. They're insane, his tactical officer shrieked. They're ramming us. Deliberately ramming us. The Council fleet began to break formation. Ships scattered to avoid the incoming human vessels. The perfect textbook formation dissolved into chaos. Admiral Vector watched his tactical display turn into a nightmare of confused vectors and panicked maneuvers. By the time the battle ended 6 hours later, the Council fleet had taken New Harmony. But at what cost? 300 ships destroyed or crippled, thousands of crew dead. The remaining vessels were scattered and demoralized, and the entire battle had been broadcast across the galaxy by human communication drones. Everyone had watched. The Council had won, but it felt like defeat. On Earth, Director Chen watched the battle recordings with a grim expression. Every human ship lost, every life sacrificed. But the message had been sent. The galaxy had seen human crews evacuate their vessels moments before impact. They had seen captains staying at their post to the last second, ensuring the AI targeting remained true. They had seen humanity fight with a desperation and ferocity that the peaceful Council species couldn't comprehend. Begin Phase 2, Chen ordered. Send the message to all Council space. Across every communication channel in the galaxy, The same transmission played. Images of the Battle of New Harmony. Human ships fighting impossible odds. Crews ramming their vessels into enemy warships. The final transmission from Captain Sarah Mitchell recorded moments before she evacuated the Defiance. "This is what it costs to cross us. Every world you take will make you pay for in blood. We didn't want this war, but now you'll learn what war truly means." The transmission ended with a simple statement in every galactic language. New Harmony was the first. "If you continue, we'll show you what happens when humanity stops being patient." In the Galactic Council chambers, the mood had shifted. The laughter was gone. The condescension had evaporated. For the first time in millennia, the council members felt something they had forgotten existed: fear. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of the New Harmony battle. Senior Arbiter Krelnak stood at the central platform, his mandibles clicking with agitation. Around him, representatives from thousands of species filled the chamber. For the first time in anyone's memory, they looked worried. "The human aggression cannot stand," Krelnax announced. "They have attacked Council peacekeepers. They have broadcast propaganda across civilized space. They have violated every principle of lawful warfare." Ambassador Tisora of the Velen Collective raised a tentacle. Her species had been part of the Council for 8,000 years. "With respect, Senior Arbiter, the humans were defending their sovereign territory. Perhaps we should reconsider." "Reconsider?" Krelnax's voice rose. "They rammed their ships into our vessels. They killed thousands of Council personnel. This is barbarism, not warfare. They must be brought to heel." The vote was swift. 5,000 Council warships would assemble. 10% of the entire galactic military force. They would occupy Earth and the core human worlds. Humanity would be placed under protective custodianship. Their government would be dismantled. Their military dissolved. They would be taught civilization properly this time. The Council fleet began gathering at staging points across the galaxy. It would take 3 months to fully assemble, the greatest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Humanity had 3 months to prepare, but humanity didn't prepare. They attacked. Lieutenant Marcus Torres crouched in the shadows of a Council fuel depot on the planet Kelvar 3. Behind him, 12 other human Marines waited in silence. They had been living on this world for 2 years, posing as civilian technicians. The Council had never suspected. Why would they? Humans were primitive, harmless, barely worth watching. "Charges placed," Marcus whispered into his comm. "All teams report." Across the planet, 50 other human teams confirmed readiness. In orbit, supposedly civilian human cargo ships began moving into position, and on 300 other Council worlds, similar operations were beginning simultaneously. "Execute," Marcus ordered. The fuel depot exploded in a fireball that could be seen from orbit. Across Kelvar III, munitions warehouses, shipyards, communication hubs, and military installations erupted in coordinated destruction. The human cargo ships in orbit revealed hidden weapons and began striking Council naval vessels before they could raise shields. The same scenario played out on hundreds of worlds simultaneously. Humans who had seemed harmless, civilians going about their business, suddenly became soldiers. Technicians who had maintained Council systems for years activated virus programs that crashed logistics networks. Human-designed malware, created by hackers who had grown up breaking computer systems for entertainment, tore through Council data infrastructure like wildfire. Admiral Kelvis commanded the Council's 3rd Defense Fleet from his flagship. He watched in horror as his tactical display showed red alerts spreading across 50 star systems. "How is this possible? How are they everywhere?" His intelligence officer's voice shook. "Sir, we've been tracking human civilians for decades. There are humans working throughout Council space. Technicians, traders, engineers, teachers, entertainment workers. We never considered they might be intelligence assets." "They're not warriors," Kelvis said. "They're merchants and workers, and they're all warriors now," his officer interrupted. "Every human in Council space is attacking simultaneously. It's coordinated, planned. They've been preparing for this for years." Kelvis felt something cold settle in his stomach. The Council had dismissed humanity as emotional and primitive. They had laughed at human passion and intensity. They had never considered that humans might channel that same intensity into long-term planning. That human patience might be a deliberate strategy rather than weakness. On Earth, Director Chen stood in the Aurora Initiative Command Center, watching reports flood in from across the galaxy. Humans had embedded themselves in Council society precisely because the Council dismissed them. Every insult, every condescending remark, every dismissive gesture had been armor that let humans move freely through enemy territory. Phase 3 is go, Chen announced. Launch the Prometheus fleet. In orbital shipyards hidden in asteroid fields and behind moons throughout human space, massive doors opened. 37 ships emerged, each one larger than any human vessel the Council had seen before. The Prometheus-class warships represented 10 years of secret development. They combined reverse-engineered Council technology with human innovation and a willingness to embrace experimental systems that the cautious Council would never approve. The lead ship, UHNS Prometheus, was commanded by Admiral James Okafor. He stood on the bridge and watched his fleet form up around him. All ships, this is Okafor. We've spent our entire careers training for this moment. We've studied every battle the Council ever fought. We've learned their tactics, their weaknesses, their blind spots. He paused, letting his words sink in. They think they know war because they've read about it in manuals. We know war because it's in our history, in our blood. Our ancestors fought each other for thousands of years, and we learned from every single one of those conflicts. We learned what works, what doesn't, and most importantly, we learned that following the rules is how you lose. The fleet began moving, heading for the nearest Council staging point. We're going to hit them hard. We're going to hit them fast, and we're not going to stop until they understand that humanity is not prey. On Council worlds, panic spread. Human attacks continued relentlessly. Supply chains collapsed. Communication networks failed. Military forces found themselves fighting insurgents they couldn't identify until it was too late. And now reports came in of a new human fleet, ships that shouldn't exist, technology that matched or exceeded Council capabilities in some areas. In the Galactic Council chambers, Senior Arbiter Krelnax received reports with increasing alarm. How long until our main fleet is assembled? 6 more weeks, Senior Arbiter, his aide reported. But our logistics are compromised. Fuel supplies are disrupted. Repair facilities have been sabotaged. Communication is spotty at best. Then we fight with what we have, Krelnax said. But his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The Battle of Titan's Gate was humanity's coming out party. The Council had established a major fleet base in a strategic system, guarding one of the major hyperspace routes to human space. 300 Council ships defended the base. Admiral Okafor brought his entire Prometheus fleet of 37 ships against them. The Council expected a suicide attack. Another desperate human gesture. Instead, they found themselves outmaneuvered and outfought. The Prometheus-class ships were fast, maneuverable, and packed with weapons that combined alien technology with human creativity. They used tactics the Council had never seen. They hacked enemy systems mid-battle. They employed electronic warfare that confused sensors and targeting. They coordinated their attacks with a fluidity that came from intense training and human adaptability. When the battle ended 12 hours later, the Council base was destroyed. 230 Council ships were crippled or destroyed. The Prometheus fleet had lost 8 ships, but the rest escaped to fight another day. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't just fighting desperately anymore. They were winning. Across the galaxy, minor species within the Council watched with growing interest. The Yevon had been conquered 300 years ago. The Mitar were restricted to their home system. The Telvar paid tribute every year. Dozens of species lived under Council dominance, told it was for their own good, told they were too primitive to govern themselves. Now they watched humans fight back, and they began to wonder. If humanity could resist, perhaps they could too. The Council's Grand Armada finally reached human space 8 months after the Battle of New Harmony. 5,000 warships, the pride of galactic military might, emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. Supreme Commander Zethkal, chosen personally by the Council leadership, stood on the bridge of the super dreadnought Infinite Justice and surveyed his fleet with satisfaction. Today we end this rebellion, he announced to his command staff. Today we remind the galaxy why the Council has maintained peace for 10,000 years. Today we show these primitives the price of defiance. The fleet began its advance toward Earth. Sensors showed the human homeworld defended by a mere 200 ships. Even with humanity's new Prometheus-class vessels, the numbers were impossible. 5,000 against 200. 25 to 1 odds. Sir, the sensor officer reported, we're detecting unusual readings throughout the system. Multiple gravity anomalies, energy signatures that don't match known human technology. Elaborate, Zethkal ordered. I'm not sure, sir. The signatures are scattered throughout the asteroid belt, around several moons in high orbit around the planets. It's almost like the first mines detonated. They had been seeded throughout the solar system over the past 8 months. Thousands of autonomous weapons platforms that had been lying dormant, virtually undetectable. Now they activated all at once, releasing swarms of missiles, energy beams, and kinetic projectiles. The Council fleet's advance formation disintegrated. Ships raised shields, but the attacks came from every direction. Point defense systems were overwhelmed. Dozens of vessels took damage before they even knew what hit them. Defensive formation, Zethkal shouted. All ships defensive formation Alpha 7. But Alpha 7 was designed for a frontal assault. The Council military handbook, 10,000 years old, had 63 standard formations for every combat scenario. All of them assumed a clear enemy position and organized resistance. The human defenders weren't organized. They were chaos incarnate. Admiral Okafor watched from the bridge of the Prometheus as the Council fleet tried to organize itself. Now, he said simply. The human fleet split into 50 independent groups. Each group had a specific target, a specific mission, but no central coordination. If the Council destroyed the flagship, humanity's fleet would keep fighting. If they eliminated the command structure, it wouldn't matter. Every captain knew what to do. It was the opposite of how the Council fought, and it was terrifyingly effective. Commander Sarah Chen had survived New Harmony by evacuating her ship. Now she commanded UHNS Vengeance, a new Prometheus-class vessel named for what humanity felt. Her target was a Council support carrier, a massive ship holding thousands of fighter craft. Take us through the asteroid field, Sarah ordered. Maximum thrust. Captain, the field is too dense. Our shields can't. I didn't ask for analysis. I gave an order. The Vengeance dove into the asteroid belt, moving at speeds that should have been suicidal. But Sarah had spent the last 6 months training in this exact region of space. She knew every rock, every debris field, every pocket of clear space. The Council ships pursuing her didn't. 2 Council destroyers tried to follow. One collided with an asteroid and exploded. The other lost track of the Vengeance and emerged on the wrong side of the belt, directly in front of 3 other human ships. Sarah brought the Vengeance around and launched every missile she had at the Council carrier. The massive ship's shields absorbed most of the impact, but that wasn't the point. The point was to make them react, to make them move. The carrier adjusted position to bring more point defense to bear. In doing so, it exposed its weaker aft shields to a cluster of autonomous mines. The explosions rippled across the carrier's hull. Atmosphere vented into space. Secondary explosions tore through the hangar bays. Target destroyed, Sarah's tactical officer reported, moving to next objective. Across the solar system, similar scenarios played out. Human ships used the environment as a weapon. They led Council vessels into the radiation belts of Jupiter, where sensors failed and shields weakened. They used the gravity well of gas giants to slingshot themselves at impossible vectors. They hid behind moons and struck from unexpected angles. The Council fleet had superior numbers and firepower. But they were fighting in humanity's home system, and humanity had spent 8 months turning their home into a death trap. On Mars, Major Li Wei watched the orbital battle from an underground command center. His mission wasn't in space. It was planetary defense. If any Council ships made it through if they tried to bombard Earth or Mars, his job was to make them regret it. Sir, we've got 3 Council cruisers breaking away from the main battle, his sensor operator reported. They're heading for Earth. Looks like they're going for orbital bombardment. Are the rail cannons ready? Li Wei asked. All 17 installations report ready. Sir, then let's show them why invading a human world is a bad idea. The Council cruisers entered Earth's orbital space, preparing to fire on population centers. It was a terror tactic designed to break human morale. They never got the chance. 17 massive rail cannons built into mountains and underground installations across Earth's surface opened fire simultaneously. The kinetic projectiles moved at a significant fraction of light speed. At that velocity, shields meant nothing. Armor meant nothing. All 3 Council cruisers were destroyed before they could fire a single shot. In space, Supreme Commander Zethkal watched his tactical display with growing horror. The battle had been raging for 6 hours. His fleet had superior numbers, superior technology, superior firepower, but they were losing. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded. His tactical officer's voice shook. 700 confirmed destroyed. Another 300 heavily damaged and combat ineffective. "We've inflicted significant casualties on the enemy, but what? But they're not breaking, sir. Normally at this level of casualties, any military force would retreat or sue for peace. The humans are still fighting. If anything, they're fighting harder." Sethkal understood then. The Council fought wars to achieve objectives with minimal casualties. They fought with restraint, with rules, with the expectation that their enemies would surrender when faced with impossible odds. Humans didn't surrender. They got angry. Every human ship destroyed made the others fight more viciously. Every casualty strengthened their resolve rather than weakening it. They weren't fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for survival, for revenge, for the right to exist without bowing to anyone. "Sir, we have multiple reports of Council ships requesting permission to retreat," his communications officer reported. "Morale is collapsing across the fleet." "Denied," Sethkal said. "We have them outnumbered. We must press the attack." But numbers didn't matter anymore. The Council fleet was scattered across the solar system, formations broken, command structure in chaos. Human ships hunted them in packs, exploiting every mistake, every moment of hesitation. The Battle of Jupiter's Moons was the turning point. Admiral Okafor concentrated his remaining forces around the gas giant and lured a Council fleet of 800 ships into pursuit. The human ships dove into the massive radiation belts surrounding Jupiter, regions of space where sensors couldn't penetrate and shields weakened dramatically. The Council ships followed, expecting an easy victory. Instead, they found hell. Human ships had been fighting in these conditions for months. Their crews wore radiation protection. Their ships were hardened against electromagnetic interference. They knew how to navigate by instinct when sensors failed. The Council forces had none of these advantages. In the chaos of Jupiter's radiation storm, human ships became ghosts. They appeared on sensors for seconds, fired devastating attacks, and disappeared again. Council ships fired on each other in the confusion. Formations collapsed completely. When the human fleet emerged from the radiation belt 6 hours later, they left behind 400 destroyed Council vessels. The human fleet had lost 30 ships. That night, footage of the battle spread across the galaxy. The image of Admiral Okafor, standing on the bridge of his damaged ship, laughing as he piloted directly into a Council dreadnought, became legendary. His ship's hull was breached. Half his crew was dead, but he was still fighting, still defiant, still refusing to quit. The laughter of a human who had nothing left to lose but was taking his enemies with him. Across Council space, the unthinkable began happening. On the planet Yavon, a conquered species 300 years under Council control, rebels stormed government buildings. On Matar Prime, restricted to their home system, the population began building warships in violation of Council law. On 30 other worlds, species that had been oppressed began asking questions. If humans could resist, why couldn't they? The monolithic authority that had ruled the galaxy for 10 millennia began to crack. 18 months after the Battle of New Harmony, Senior Arbiter Krelnak stood in the Council chambers and knew his civilization was dying. The Great Hall was half empty. Many representatives had stopped attending sessions. Some species had openly declared independence. Others simply ignored Council directives. The authority that had maintained order for 10,000 years was crumbling like ancient stone. "We must sue for peace," Ambassador Tesora said. Her voice carried across the near-empty chamber. "The war is lost. We've sacrificed millions of lives. Our economy is collapsing. Our member species are in open revolt. We must end this," Krelnax wanted to argue. Wanted to rage against the impossibility of it all. The Council had 5,000 ships. Humanity had started with barely 200. By all logic, all military doctrine, all historical precedent, the Council should have won in weeks. But humanity didn't follow logic. They followed passion, determination, a refusal to quit that bordered on insanity. "The humans will demand unconditional surrender," Krelnax said bitterly. "They'll occupy our worlds, dismantle our government. Everything we built was a lie," Tesora interrupted. "We told ourselves we maintained peace. But we maintained it through subjugation, through dismissing species we deemed primitive, through taking what we wanted and calling it civilization. She looked at the empty seats around them. Humanity didn't destroy the council. We destroyed ourselves. We were so arrogant, so certain of our superiority, that we couldn't see what we had become. Oppressors calling ourselves peacekeepers. The vote was unanimous among those who remained. The Galactic Council would offer peace terms to humanity. They would return New Harmony, grant humanity full member status, cease all hostile actions. On Earth, Director Chen read the Council's offer and laughed. It was a harsh sound without humor. He was older now. The war had aged him a decade and 18 months. So many dead, so many sacrifices. And the Council thought they could just offer to return to the status quo? No, he said simply. Ambassador Elena Vasquez, now Earth's Secretary General, sat across from him. The Council is offering everything we initially demanded. They're offering what they should have given us from the start, Chen corrected. But that's not enough. Not after New Harmony. Not after all the lives lost. The Council's structure is rotten. It needs to be torn down and rebuilt. Elena nodded slowly. She had expected this. What are our terms? Complete restructuring of galactic government. The Council is dissolved. We create a new galactic assembly with equal representation for all species, regardless of age or technological level. War crimes trials for the members of the Zethkari Tribunal, who ordered the annexation of New Harmony, reparations to be determined by an independent tribunal, and humanity gets a permanent seat on the new Security Directorate with veto power over military actions. They'll never agree to that, Elena said. Then the war continues, Chen replied. We've learned how to fight them. We can keep this going for years if necessary, but they can't. Their economy is collapsing. Their member species are in revolt. Time is on our side now. Elena carried Earth's terms to the Council. The debates lasted 3 weeks. Some Council members called the terms outrageous. Others called them fair. In the end, facing complete dissolution and continuing insurgencies across their territory, the Council agreed. The Galactic Council officially dissolved 6 months later. In its place rose the Galactic Assembly. Every species, from the most advanced to the newest spacefaring civilization, had an equal vote. Disputes would be resolved through negotiation and arbitration, not unilateral declarations. The trials of the Zethkari Tribunal members lasted 2 years. 3 were convicted of war crimes. The verdict sent a message across the galaxy. Power did not grant immunity from justice. New Harmony was returned to human control. The colonists came home to find their world scarred by battle but still standing. A massive memorial was erected at the site of the first Council landing. 4.7 million names were carved into black stone, representing every colonist who had been willing to resist, every person who had been ready to fight for their home. The memorial became a pilgrimage site. Species from across the galaxy came to see it, to understand what had happened, to learn the lesson humanity had taught in blood and fire. 5 years after the war ended, Elena Vasquez stood at that memorial. She was old now. Her hair was white. Her hands shook with age and the weight of memories. Behind her, hundreds of former soldiers and civilians gathered for the annual remembrance ceremony. We never wanted this, Elena said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. We came to the stars hoping for peace, for understanding, for cooperation among civilizations. She looked at the names carved in stone. But when faced with injustice, when told to abandon our homes and our dignity, we made a choice. We chose to stand. We chose to fight. And we taught the galaxy a lesson it needed to learn. Elena's voice grew stronger. Never mistake patience for weakness. Never confuse kindness with inability to act. Never assume that peace-loving people are incapable of war. Because when you push people past their breaking point, when you cross that final boundary, you discover what they're truly capable of. In the crowd, former soldiers wept quietly. They remembered friends lost, ships destroyed, the terrible calculus of sacrifice and survival. But they also remembered victory. The moment when the galaxy learned to respect humanity. The moment when oppressed species across the stars began to believe freedom was possible. On Earth, the UHNS Prometheus hung in orbit, now the flagship of humanity's defense fleet. Young officers trained on her decks, learning the lessons bought with blood. They studied the battles, the tactics, the strategies that had won an impossible war, but more importantly, they learned why those battles had been fought. They learned about New Harmony, about the Council's dismissal of human rights, about the moment when humanity decided that some things were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Lieutenant Jessica Torres, daughter of Marcus Torres, who had helped sabotage Council installations, stood in the Prometheus's observation deck and looked at Earth below. She wore a patch on her uniform that had become standard for all human military personnel. It showed a simple statement in a dozen languages. "We hoped you'd never make us do this." That was humanity's true strength, she thought. Not their weapons or their tactics or their willingness to sacrifice. It was that they had genuinely wanted peace. They had tried diplomacy. They had shown patience and restraint, but when pushed past the point of no return, they had exploded with a fury that reshaped the galaxy. In the Galactic Assembly Building on the neutral world of Concordia, representatives from thousands of species gathered daily. Humans sat among them now as equals. Some species still resented humanity, others respected them. A few feared them. All of them understood that the old way was gone. The era of one civilization dominating all others had ended. The galaxy had entered a new age, born from conflict but holding the promise of genuine cooperation. Ambassador Chen Liu, grandson of Director Chen, addressed the assembly during a debate about trade rights. His words were measured and diplomatic. But every species in the chamber remembered what humans were capable of when their patience ended. It made for very polite negotiations. On the frontier worlds, human colonies continued to expand. They carried with them the memory of New Harmony, the knowledge that their government would defend them, that humanity would never again bow to unjust authority. And on 1,000 worlds across the galaxy, other species told the story to their children. The story of how humanity had been pushed too far, how they had exploded with righteous fury, how they had proven that no matter how advanced or powerful a civilization became, it could still fall if it forgot the basic principles of justice and equality. The lesson was simple and eternal: never cross humanity's boundary. Because on the other side of that line was something the galaxy had forgotten existed. Not just war, but total commitment. Not just resistance, but absolute refusal to surrender. Not just fighting, but the willingness to burn everything down rather than submit to injustice. Elena Vasquez's words had proven prophetic 5 years earlier. The Council had mistaken humanity's patience for weakness. They had confused restraint with inability. They had assumed that young civilizations could be pushed around without consequence. They had learned otherwise. And the galaxy was better for it. As the sun set on New Harmony, painting the memorial in shades of red and gold, the gathered crowd dispersed slowly. They carried with them the weight of memory and the hope of tomorrow. The war was over. Peace had returned, but humanity would never forget, would never again be dismissed or underestimated, would never again allow injustice to go unchallenged. The galaxy had pushed them past the boundary. Humanity had exploded, and when the smoke cleared, a new order had emerged from the ashes of the old. An order built not on dominance but on respect, not on submission but on equality, not on fear of the powerful, but on fear of crossing those who fought for what was right. The stars shone down on a changed galaxy, and humanity stood among them, no longer as children or subordinates, but as equals who had earned their place through fire and blood and unwavering determination.